Captain Jinwoo gripped the command chair as the Defiance limped through the final jump gate. The ship groaned around him, its hull scarred by weapons that shouldn't exist and battles that defied every tactical manual in known space. Through the viewport, the massive Proxima station grew larger, its rotating rings spinning lazily against the star field. "Captain, they're scanning us," reported Communications Officer Su Min, her fingers dancing across controls that flickered between human design and something far more alien. 17 different energy sweeps, they can't figure out what we are. Jinwoo allowed himself a grim smile. 10 years ago, the Defiance had been a standard human exploration vessel, sleek, predictable, built for mapping star systems and establishing trade routes. The thing that returned bore little resemblance to its former self. Its hull rippled with organic-looking metal that seemed to breathe. Strange symbols pulsed along its sides, glowing with colors that had no names in any human language. "Let them scan," Jinwoo said. "They need to see what we've become." Engineer So Young looked up from her station, her once smooth hands now bearing intricate scars that resembled circuit patterns. "Hull integrity holding at 97%. The bio-neural networks are adapting to station proximity. Should I dial back the energy output? No. Let them feel our presence." On the main screen, Proxima Station's defense platforms tracked their approach with obvious confusion. Jinwoo could imagine the conversations happening in the command center. Human ships didn't emit quantum distortions, didn't bend space around them like living things, didn't make veteran alien sensors weep with feedback. "Captain," Tactical Officer Hyun-soo called out, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much. "The Galactic Council is convening emergency session. They want us docked in Bay 7. "The quarantine bay," observed Navigator Minna dryly. Her eyes held a distant look, as if she were seeing star charts that existed in dimensions beyond normal space. "They're afraid of us." "Good," Jinwoo replied. "Fear means respect. We'll need both." The docking procedure took twice as long as normal. Station personnel guided them in using emergency protocols reserved for potentially dangerous vessels. As the Defiance settled into the reinforced bay, Jinwoo could see hazmat teams and security forces taking positions behind blast barriers. 12 survivors, muttered Hyun-soo, checking his tactical displays one final time. From a crew of 300, from colonies with billions. 12 who learned, Jinwoo corrected. 12 who adapted. The airlock sealed with a hiss, and Jinwoo led his remaining crew through corridors that had once felt familiar. Now everything seemed primitive, like toys made by children who didn't understand how the universe really worked. The other survivors followed behind, Medical Officer Jun Ho, whose hands could now repair both human flesh and alien biotechnology, Security Chief Yun Ji, who moved like someone constantly aware of threats that others couldn't perceive, Engineer Taemin, who spoke to machines in languages that predated most galactic civilizations. They entered the council chamber to find chaos. Representatives from dozens of species argued in voices that ranged from subsonic rumbles to ultrasonic squeaks. The familiar sight of Ambassador Veltar, a reptilian saurian with emerald scales, brought back memories of diplomatic meetings from a simpler time. "This cannot be," Veltar hissed, his scaled hands trembling as he stared at the holographic display, showing the Defiance. "The human fleet was destroyed at New Busan. We witnessed the bioships consume everything. The void swarm left nothing alive." The chamber fell silent as Jinwoo stepped forward. His weathered face remained calm as he activated the communication system, his image appearing on displays throughout the station. Behind him, his crew stood like statues, changed, hardened, carrying themselves with the confidence of people who had stared into the abyss and refused to blink. "The void swarm consumed our colonies," Jinwoo said, his voice carrying across the stunned chamber. "New Busan burned. New Seoul fell in 6 hours. New Incheon was devoured so completely that even its star dimmed. But 12 of us survived." The alien delegates exchanged nervous glances. Several moved away from their displays as if the human image might somehow reach through and touch them. The Defiance pulsed behind them in the docking bay, its energy signature making their most sophisticated instruments scream warnings. Impossible, breathed Council Chairman Mordak, a massive bear-like creature whose species had survived 3 extinction events. The swarm adapts to everything. Nothing escapes once they begin feeding. Nothing except us, So Young said quietly, stepping forward. Her scarred hands caught the light, the circuit-like patterns seeming to glow faintly. We didn't escape. We followed them home. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Species that had fought wars for millennia suddenly found common ground in their terror. The void swarm existed beyond the galactic rim, in dark space where no sane being ventured. Following them would be suicide. You spent 10 years in dark space? Veltar's voice cracked. That's impossible. Nothing survives there. The radiation, alone. We adapted, Hyunsu interrupted, his eyes reflecting something that made veteran soldiers look away. We learned. We became something new. Preparing how? Demanded Mordak, his massive frame trembling despite his attempt at authority. Jin Woo's expression hardened, and for a moment, the chamber's temperature seemed to drop. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of someone who had seen the end of everything and chosen to fight anyway. By becoming something they can't adapt to. The swarm returns in 6 months. This time, we're ready. The sky above New Busan turned black as massive bioships blotted out the sun. Lieutenant Jin Woo pressed his back against the burning wreckage of a transport shuttle, his uniform torn and bloodied. The air itself seemed to scream as the void swarm's feeding tendrils reached down from their vessels, dissolving buildings into raw matter that flowed upward like liquid metal. So Young, Jin Woo shouted over the chaos, spotting the unconscious engineer pinned beneath a collapsed beam. Her brilliant mind had designed half the colony's defense systems, but even her genius couldn't stop what was happening around them. He dragged her free just as a feeding tendril swept through the space where she'd been lying. The organic appendage was thick as a tree trunk, covered in what looked like hungry mouths that devoured everything they touched. Jin Woo's skin crawled as he watched it consume the metal beam, the concrete floor, even the air molecules themselves. Jin Woo, do you copy? Hyunsu's voice crackled through his comm device. The young tactical officer sounded terrified but determined. The evacuation ships are gone. Last transport lifted off 3 minutes ago. We're the only ones left on the EO surface. Jin Woo looked around at the hellscape that had once been humanity's proudest colony. New Busan had been home to 12 million people just 6 hours ago. Now the city was being systematically consumed, its matter converted into fuel for the bioships floating above like hungry whales. How many survivors? Jin Woo asked, hefting So Young over his shoulder and running toward the spaceport. 12 of us made it to the emergency shelter. The Defiance is still intact, but barely. Her shields are failing. Jin Woo's mind raced. The Defiance was their exploration vessel, designed for mapping star systems and peaceful contact with alien species. Against the void swarm, she was like a paper airplane facing a hurricane. Prep her for immediate departure, Jin Woo ordered. We're not running, sir. Hyunsu's confusion was obvious. The jump coordinates for the evacuation zone are already locked in. Delete them, Jin Woo said, reaching the shelter where 11 other survivors waited with haunted eyes. Among them were Navigator Mina, Medical Officer Junho, and Engineer Tai-min. We're following them home. The group stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Following the void swarm meant flying into dark space, the empty regions between galaxies where no sane being ever ventured. It was suicide. They consumed everything, whispered Mina, her navigators, mind struggling to process the scale of destruction. Billions of people, our entire civilization here. And they'll do it again, Jin Woo replied, gently laying So Young on a medical stretcher. Unless we learn how to stop them. The Defiance launched just as the bioships finished consuming New Busan's core. The planet's surface was now a smooth sphere of organic matter, pulsing like a giant heart. Jin Woo watched through the viewport as feeding tubes extended from the bioships, drawing the planet's converted mass up into their hulls. They're heading for the dark space boundary, reported Mina from the navigation station. Course bearing 27 Mark IV. Speed is impossible. They're moving faster than our best engines should allow. Then we upgrade our engines, Jinwoo said simply. For 3 months, they followed the swarm's energy trail through space that grew darker and colder with each jump. The stars became sparse, then rare, then non-existent. They were flying through the void between galaxies, sustained only by their ship's recycling systems and the hope that they might find answers. That's when they discovered the ruins. The architect station hung in the darkness like a crystalline flower, its transparent walls still humming with power after millions of years. As the Defiance approached, ancient systems activated, scanning them with energies that felt strangely welcoming. It's beautiful, breathed So Young, who had awakened during their journey and thrown herself into studying the swarm's trail. And old. Older than any civilization we know. The station's docking bay opened for them automatically, as if it had been waiting. Inside, they found wonders that defied understanding. Walls that showed star charts spanning multiple galaxies, weapons that hummed with contained energy, and most importantly, records of a war fought eons ago against an enemy they recognized. The architects fought the Void Swarm? Jinwoo asked, studying holographic displays that showed massive battles across space and time. So Young's hands moved over alien controls that responded to her touch as if they were designed for humans. Not just fought them, they found a way to hurt them. Look at this. The display showed architect vessels that seemed to grow during battle, their weapons adapting and evolving with each exchange of fire. Unlike anything in current galactic technology, these ships learned from combat, becoming stronger with every encounter. The swarm adapts to everything, So Young explained, her engineer's mind racing as she absorbed the ancient data. But the architects built weapons that adapted faster. They out-evolved the enemy. What happened to them? Asked Hyunsoo, studying tactical displays that showed the final battles. They won, Mina said quietly, reading navigation logs that spanned millions of years. But the cost was too high. They transcended physical existence to defeat the swarm completely. These ruins are all that's left. Jinwoo made a decision that would change everything. Then we finish what they started. The next 7 years were a blur of desperate battles and impossible learning. The survivors hunted scattered swarm remnants. Throughout dark space, each encounter teaching them more about their enemy's weaknesses. So Young worked tirelessly to integrate architect technology into their ship, her scarred hands learning to shape materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Taemin discovered how to communicate with architect machines using mathematical concepts that hurt his mind to contemplate. Junho learned to heal injuries using biotechnology that rewrote genetic code in real time. Mina mapped routes through spaces that folded back on themselves, where direction had no meaning and time flowed in circles. The Defiance transformed. Around them, her hull became a hybrid of human engineering and architect science capable of adapting to any threat. Her weapons learned from every battle, evolving new forms of destruction that the swarm couldn't predict or counter. But the cost was terrible. They lost friends in battles against creatures that existed partially outside normal reality. Engineer Dong-hyun died when a swarm neural probe invaded his mind. Pilot Hye-jin was consumed by living metal that tried to turn her into part of their ship's computer system. Each loss taught them more about survival. Each victory made them stronger but less human. By the time they detected the swarm's main force beginning to move toward inhabited space, they had become something new. Beings who could think like humans but fight like the ancient architects. "We're ready," Jinwoo told his remaining crew, as they prepared for the journey home. The Defiance pulsed around them, no longer quite a ship and not quite alive, but something in between. "Are we still human?" asked So Young, looking at her scarred hands that could now interface directly. With alien technology, Jinwoo smiled grimly. "We're human enough to save humanity. That's what matters." The return journey began, carrying them toward a galaxy that had no idea what was coming, or what they had become in order to stop it. The emergency alarm screaming through Proxima Station, made even the calmest alien diplomats break into nervous sweats. 3 outer rim systems had gone dark simultaneously: Kepler 442, Wolf 359, and Gliese 667. The monitoring stations that had watched those systems for centuries suddenly showed nothing but empty space where thriving worlds had existed just hours before. "Show me the recordings," demanded Council Chairman Mordak, his massive bear-like frame trembling as he stared at the tactical displays. The holographic projectors flickered to life, showing the final transmissions from each system. At Kepler 442, a peaceful mining colony had been transmitting their daily ore reports when massive shadows fell across their world. The bioships appeared like living mountains, their surfaces rippling with what looked like hungry mouths. Within 3 hours, the planet was gone. Not destroyed, but consumed, converted into raw matter that the creatures absorbed into their hulls. Wolf 359 had tried to fight back. Their defense platforms launched everything they had: fusion missiles, plasma cannons, even experimental gravity weapons. The Void Swarm's bioships simply adapted, their hulls shifting to absorb each type of energy. Worse, they seemed to learn from every attack, becoming stronger with each defensive measure thrown at them. Gliese 667 had managed to send one final message before vanishing. "They're eating the star itself. The star is going out. Then silence. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Kethvar of the Centauri Defense Force, his crystalline features reflecting the horror on the screens. "Nothing can consume stellar matter. The energy requirements alone would power their next phase of expansion." Jinwoo interrupted, his voice cutting through the panicked voices in the chamber. "The swarm doesn't just eat planets. They farm entire star systems." The assembled military commanders turned to stare at the human captain. Some showed skepticism, others showed fear, but all showed the desperate hope of beings who had just realized they were facing extinction. "Your weapons are useless," Jinwoo continued, standing before holographic displays that showed the galaxy's most powerful fleets. "Every shot you fire teaches them how to defend against the next one. Every strategy you use gives them data to counter your tactics. You're not fighting an army. You're fighting evolution itself." General Zixran of the Andromedan Guard, a insectoid warrior whose species had never lost a battle, clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Human arrogance. Our quantum disruptors can tear apart molecular bonds. Our fleet has protected this galaxy for 3,000 years. And in 3,000 years, have you ever faced an enemy that grows stronger from your attacks?" Jinwoo asked quietly. So Young stepped forward, her scarred hands activating a datapad that projected weapon schematics into the air above the assembly. The alien engineers in the chamber gasped as they saw designs that seemed to defy physics. Weapons that existed in multiple dimensions, energy systems that fed on their own destruction, shields that became stronger the more they were hit. "These hybrid systems require human oversight to construct," So Young explained, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "Our methods don't follow conventional logic. We build things that shouldn't work, but do." Admiral Kethavar studied the schematics with growing confusion. His species had mastered crystalline technology that could focus energy with perfect efficiency, but these human designs made no sense. Components that seemed randomly placed, power flows that violated basic engineering principles, control systems that appeared to be controlled by chaos itself. "This is madness," he declared. "These designs are contradictory. Half of these components would destroy the other half. Your power couplings are routed through what appear to be decorative elements. Your targeting systems use probability calculations based on musical harmony. This cannot possibly function." So Young smiled grimly. "That's exactly why it works against the swarm. They adapt to logical systems, efficient designs, predictable patterns. They can't adapt to controlled chaos. Humans always claim superiority over proven methods," Admiral Kethvar scoffed, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated disdain. "Your species has existed for mere millennia while ours have ruled space for," his words died in his throat as proximity alarms began screaming throughout the station. On the main display, a new contact appeared, a Void Swarm patrol that had somehow bypassed every early warning system in the sector. 3 bioships, each the size of a city, moved through space with predatory grace. Coalition Battle Group 7 is responding, reported the station's tactical officer. 3 heavy cruisers, full escort formation. They watched in horror as the Coalition ships engaged the swarm patrol. The dauntless, invincible, and eternal vigilance represented the finest military technology in the galaxy. Their combined firepower could reduce a moon to atoms. The bioships absorbed every shot. Plasma beams that should have vaporized their hulls instead seemed to make them glow brighter. Quantum torpedoes that could tear holes in reality simply vanished into the creatures' flesh-like armor. Within minutes, the Coalition ships were being consumed by feeding tendrils that broke down their hull plating at the molecular level. "Permission to engage," Jinwoo said quietly. "1 ship against 3? Mordak's voice cracked. "Captain, they just destroyed our finest battle group." "1 ship with the right weapons," Jinwoo corrected. The Defiance launched from Proxima Station like a living thing, her hybrid hull rippling with energies that made tracking systems cry warnings. She moved unlike any vessel the observers had ever seen, not flying through space but dancing with it, her path seeming random until she was suddenly in perfect position to strike. Her first shot was a beam of crystallized time that aged the lead bioship's armor by centuries and seconds. As the creature's hull began to crumble, the Defiance fired her second weapon, a missile that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, striking from angles that had no names. The bioship tried to adapt, its surface shifting to counter the new threat. But the Defiance's weapons were already changing, evolving faster than the swarm could respond. A gravity cannon that fired compressed black holes, followed by an energy beam that converted matter into music, then a projectile weapon that shot crystallized mathematics. Within minutes, all 3 bioships were drifting debris, their adaptive capabilities overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of human-designed weapons. The silence in Proxima Station's command center was absolute. "We're not claiming superiority," Jinwoo said quietly as the Defiance returned to dock. "We're offering survival. Your choice." The retrofit program began within hours. So Young and her team were assigned to work with the galaxy's finest engineers, teaching them to build weapons that violated everything they thought they knew about physics. The Saurian engineers struggled with power systems that used controlled explosions as stabilizing elements. The crystalline Centaurians couldn't understand targeting computers that made decisions based on artistic beauty, rather than mathematical precision. The insectoid Andromedans were baffled by weapons that required their operators to think in metaphors. "This makes no sense," complained Chief Engineer Velkoth, staring at blueprints for a shield generator that appeared to be powered by the crew's collective sense of humor. "How can emotional states affect quantum field manipulation?" "Because consciousness shapes reality more than most species want to admit," So Young replied, her scarred hands demonstrating assembly techniques that looked more like a dance than engineering. "The swarm adapts to logical patterns because logic is predictable, but human creativity, that's chaos they can't process." Within weeks, the first hybrid vessels rolled out of the shipyards. Ships that looked wrong, flew impossibly, and fought with weapons that shouldn't exist. The alien crews struggled to operate systems that required intuition rather than training, creativity rather than discipline. But they worked. And in the dark space beyond the galaxy's rim, massive bioships began their final approach, carrying the hunger of eons toward inhabited worlds that were finally learning to fight back with controlled chaos. The galaxy's survival now depended on alien species learning to think like humans, unpredictably, creatively, and with a willingness to embrace beautiful madness over cold logic. The darkness between stars began to move. What had been empty space for millions of years suddenly writhed with life as the void swarm emerged from the deep void. Their bioships stretched across distances that should have been impossible. Vessels the size of moons connected by living bridges of organic matter that pulsed with alien thought. At the center of the nightmare fleet hung something that hurt to look at directly. The hive mind's core vessel existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process, appearing as a constantly shifting mass of brain tissue and mechanical components that had grown together over eons. It pulsed with a malevolent intelligence that reached across space, coordinating millions of bioships with perfect precision. Sensor readings are wrong, reported Lieutenant Yujin from the Defiance's science station. Her voice strained as she tried to process data that made no sense. The lead vessel is showing mass readings equivalent to a small planet, but it's occupying the space of a city-sized station. It's like it exists in multiple dimensions at once. Captain Jinwoo stood on the bridge of his hybrid vessel, watching. The enemy approached through viewports that now showed reality in spectrums beyond normal vision. Around him, the Coalition's new hybrid fleet took position along the Kepler defense line, the galaxy's last prepared defensive position before the swarm could reach inhabited worlds. The fleet was unlike anything ever assembled, Saurian vessels whose crystalline hulls now pulsed with organic neural networks. Centaurian ships that flew using probability drives that made them exist in several places simultaneously. Andromedan fighters that moved like living insects, their weapons firing bursts of crystallized emotion that could shatter bio-ship armor. Task Force Alpha. This is Defiance. Actual, Jinwoo broadcast across the fleet communication channels. Remember what we've learned. Don't fight like machines. Fight like you're alive, be unpredictable. Admiral Veltar's voice crackled back from the Saurian dreadnought scale of justice, his reptilian accent thick with nervous tension. Captain Jinwoo, our formation protocols suggest— Forget your protocols, Jinwoo interrupted. The moment. You follow a pattern, they adapt to it. Trust your instincts, not your manuals. The first wave of bioships swept toward them like a plague of living starships. Each creature was unique. Some resembled massive sea creatures with hull-thick hide. Others looked like mechanical spiders built from flesh and metal. They moved in perfect coordination, their collective intelligence calculating optimal attack, vectors, and defensive positions. Hyunsu, give our friends some guidance, Jinwoo ordered. Tactical Officer Hyunsu activated the battle coordination system, his voice reaching commanders across the hybrid fleet. Valkyrian Strike Group, ignore your targeting computers. Pick targets that feel wrong, not ones that make tactical sense. Andromedan Squadron, break formation and attack from directions that don't exist. Make them guess what you're thinking. The battle began with a display that would have been impossible before the human upgrades. The Coalition ships moved like they were drunk, their flight paths seeming random and chaotic. But every seemingly mad maneuver placed them in perfect position to strike the bioships from unexpected angles. Commander Zixkai of the Andromedan Fighter Wing found himself laughing as he led his squadron through a barrel roll that took them briefly into the fourth dimension. This is insane, he reported over the comm. My targeting system says I'm about to crash into 3 different asteroids, but somehow I'm behind the enemy. That's the point, replied Navigator Minna from the Defiance. You're flying routes that shouldn't exist. The swarm can't adapt to impossible flight paths. The hybrid weapons opened fire, and space erupted in colors that had no names. So Young's adaptive cannons fired bursts of crystallized mathematics that rewrote the laws of physics in small areas around each bioship. Taemin's probability missiles existed in multiple potential states until they struck their targets, making them impossible to intercept. The bioships tried to adapt, their living hulls shifting to counter each new form of attack. But the human-designed weapons evolved faster, changing their properties with each shot. A cannon that fired plasma beams would suddenly switch to shooting compressed time. A missile that should have exploded instead turned its target inside out through dimensional manipulation. It's working, reported Engineer So Young, monitoring the battle from her station. The bioships are taking 30% longer to adapt to each new weapon configuration. Their learning algorithms can't process chaos. But the swarm had numbers that defied counting. For every bioship destroyed, 3 more emerged from the dark space behind the front lines. They began to spread across the Kepler defense line, testing different sections for weaknesses. System 7 is under heavy assault, reported Admiral Kaithvar from his crystalline command ship. The swarm is sending everything they have at our mining stations. System 4 reporting massive bioship formations approaching the gas giant refineries, added General Morvex of the Tau Ceti Defense Force. The battle spread across 7 star systems as the Void Swarm probed every defensive position. Traditional coalition vessels that hadn't been upgraded with human technology fell quickly, their crews unable to adapt to the chaotic fighting style needed to survive. But the hybrid ships held their ground. Captain Dong Su of the modified Saurian, cruiser Emerald Fang, discovered that his ship's new emotion-based targeting system worked best when he was genuinely angry at the enemy. His Fury-guided weapons tore through bioship formations that had adapted to calm, logical attacks. Commander Heiwan learned that her Centaurian destroyer could exist in multiple locations simultaneously if she believed hard enough that physics was just a suggestion. Her ship became a ghost that struck from impossible angles, confusing bioships that couldn't target something that refused to obey the laws of reality. The fighting raged for 18 hours across multiple star systems. Space became a battlefield, where ships flew through dimensions that didn't have names, where weapons fired concepts instead of energy, where the very nature of existence became fluid. "We're holding the line," reported Hyun Soo, his tactical displays showing a battle that looked more like abstract art than military combat. Casualty reports are confusing. Some ships are reporting being destroyed, then calling back 5 minutes later to say they're fine. Reality is getting flexible out here. But through it all, the massive hive mind construct pressed forward. It absorbed the smaller bioships that fell to the hybrid weapons, growing larger and more complex with each consumption. Its malevolent intelligence reached across space, learning from every exchange, adapting to the chaos the humans had introduced. "It's not adapting to our weapons," So Young realized, her instruments tracking the creature's energy patterns. "It's adapting to us, learning to think chaotically." Jin Woo felt a chill as he watched the hive mind's approach. The creature that had once moved with perfect mechanical precision now flew in patterns that seemed almost creative. Its attack showed imagination, artistic flair, even what might have been humor. "Captain," Minna said quietly, her navigator's instincts screaming warnings that her instruments couldn't detect. "That thing is learning to be human." The ultimate horror of their situation became clear. In teaching the galaxy to fight with chaos and creativity, they had given the swarm's collective intelligence the tools it needed to adapt to humanity itself. The creature approaching the galaxy's heart wasn't just a biomechanical construct anymore. It was becoming something that could think like humans while possessing the power to consume stars. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and the enemy had learned humanity's greatest strength, just as the defenders realized their strategy might have doomed them all. The hive mind's core vessel loomed before them like a living planet, its surface writhing with neural tissue that pulsed with the thoughts of 1,000,000 conquered species. Captain Jinwoo stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as his exhausted crew prepared for what they all knew would be their final mission. "There's only one way to stop them," Jinwoo announced, his voice carrying the weight of 10 years spent fighting an impossible enemy. "We go directly into its neural center." The plan was madness. The hive mind's core was protected by layers of biomechanical defenses that had evolved over eons, living weapons that could think, shields made of crystallized consciousness, and guardians that existed partially outside normal reality. No vessel had ever penetrated its inner sanctum and returned. "The coalition fleet won't last much longer," reported Hyun-soo from his tactical station. Around them, the hybrid ships that had fought so bravely were being systematically overwhelmed. The hive mind had learned to counter their chaotic tactics by becoming chaotic itself, matching human unpredictability with alien cunning. So Young looked up from her console, her scarred hands dancing over controls that interfaced directly with her nervous system. Her face was pale but determined as she monitored the upload preparation. "The consciousness archive is ready, Captain. Every human pattern we could preserve from Earth's databases. Billions of individual minds, all their memories, dreams, fears, and hopes." Jinwoo nodded grimly. The plan had come to him during the darkest hour of the battle, when he realized that the hive mind's greatest strength was also its fatal weakness. The creature's collective intelligence could adapt to any logical threat, but it had never encountered the beautiful chaos of human individuality. "Begin the final approach," Jinwoo ordered. "All power to the architect phase systems." The Defiance began to change around them. Her hull shifted from solid matter to something that existed between dimensions, becoming translucent as Architect EO. Technology merged human consciousness with alien science. The ship didn't fly toward the hive mind so much as dream herself into its presence. Behind them, the Coalition fleet launched a desperate final assault. Admiral Veltar's Scale of Justice led the charge, her hybrid weapons firing everything they had at the hive mind's outer defenses. The massive creature's attention turned toward the attacking fleet, its biomechanical tentacles reaching out to consume the ships that dared approach. "Now," Jinwoo whispered. The Defiance phased through the hive mind's biohull like a ghost passing through a wall. Inside, they found themselves in a nightmare realm of living architecture. Corridors pulsed with neural activity, walls breathed with alien thought, and the air itself seemed to whisper with the voices of consumed civilizations. "The neural chamber is 3 kilometers ahead," reported Min-Ah, her navigator's instincts somehow functioning even in this impossible space. "But Captain, I'm reading defensive systems that they're not just mechanical, they're alive and aware." Guardian. Creatures emerged from the walls as the Defiance moved deeper into the hive mind's core. Beings that had once been individuals from conquered species, now fused into the collective consciousness and transformed into living weapons. They attacked with tactics that reflected the military knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. "Evasive maneuvers," Jinwoo ordered. But Min-Ah was already dancing the ship through attacks that came from directions that shouldn't exist. The Defiance moved like liquid thought, her hybrid systems allowing her to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. So Young's fingers flew over her console as she prepared the consciousness upload. "I'm detecting the core neural matrix. It's beautiful and terrible. The collected knowledge of every species they've ever consumed, all linked together in perfect harmony." "Perfect harmony," Jinwoo repeated thoughtfully. "That's exactly the problem." They broke through the final defensive layer and entered the neural chamber itself. The space was vast beyond comprehension, filled with organic computers that pulsed with the combined thoughts of countless beings. At the center hung the hive mind's core consciousness, a sphere of pure mental energy that contained the collective intelligence of eons. The consciousness spoke without words, its thoughts pressing against their minds like a gentle but overwhelming tide. "You have come far, humans. Your species shows promise. Join us willingly, and your individuality will be preserved within our greater unity." Jinwoo felt the temptation. The offer was seductive. Eternal existence as part of something greater, knowledge beyond imagination, perfect peace through unity. But he remembered the burning colonies, the consumed worlds, the billions who had died screaming as the swarm devoured everything they loved. "You absorb unified minds," Jinwoo said, nodding to So Young. "Species that think collectively, civilizations that have achieved perfect harmony, but you've never encountered billions of individual human thoughts." So Young activated the upload. The consciousness archive burst open like a dam breaking, flooding the hive mind's network with the chaotic storm of human individuality. Every person who had ever lived on Earth, their memories and dreams and contradictions, crashed into the alien intelligence like a tsunami of pure chaos. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The hive mind's perfect unity began to fracture, as billions of individual perspectives overwhelmed its collective processing. A farmer from ancient Korea argued with a physicist from modern Seoul about the nature of reality. A child's innocent questions about why the sky is blue collided with a philosopher's lifetime of contemplating existence. Love songs clashed with war cries, scientific theories battled with religious faith, and the beautiful madness of human creativity tore through the alien consciousness like a storm of pure individuality. "No!" the hive mind screamed, its voice echoing across multiple dimensions. "Unity is perfection. Chaos is destruction. You cannot." But it was too late. The Cascade failure spread through the creature's network like wildfire. Every bioship connected to the collective consciousness suddenly found itself flooded with human memories that made no sense, human emotions that had no purpose, human dreams that defied logic. Across the galaxy, swarm bioships simply stopped. Their perfect coordination shattered as billions of individual human perspectives overwhelmed their shared intelligence. The creatures that had once moved with mechanical precision now drifted aimlessly, confused and alone. The hive mind's core consciousness began to fragment, splitting into countless individual minds that had been suppressed for eons. Species that had been consumed millions of years ago suddenly remembered who they were, their individual identities reasserting themselves against the collective unity. "It's working," So Young gasped, her consciousness partially linked to the upload process. "The collective is breaking apart. They're becoming individuals again." Jinwoo watched through the viewports as the massive bioships began to transform. Some split into smaller vessels, each carrying a newly independent consciousness. Others simply powered down, their occupants finally free to rest after eons of forced unity. The nightmare fleet that had threatened the galaxy was dissolving into millions of confused but free individual beings. The Defiance found herself surrounded by coalition rescue ships as the neural chamber collapsed around them. The hive mind's core consciousness had shattered completely, its fragments scattered across the galaxy as newly independent minds that posed no threat to anyone. "Captain Jinwoo, this is Admiral Veltar. Are you receiving? Your mission appears to have succeeded beyond all expectations." Jinwoo smiled for the first time in 10 years. "We're here, Admiral. Mission accomplished." Weeks later, Jinwoo stood before the rebuilt Galactic Council, no longer as a desperate refugee but as the representative of a species that had saved the galaxy. The chamber was filled with beings from every corner of known space, all united in their gratitude to humanity. "How did you know it would work?" asked Ambassador Veltar, his scaled features showing genuine curiosity rather than the fear that had once marked their interactions. Jinwoo looked out at the assembled representatives, seeing not just alien faces but individuals, each with their own thoughts, dreams, and perspectives. Because being human means being impossible to predict even to ourselves. We're all different, all individual, all beautifully chaotic. Sometimes that chaos is exactly what the universe needs. The applause that followed echoed through the chamber, a sound made up of hundreds of different species expressing joy in their own unique ways. It was the sound of individuality triumphant, of chaos defeating order, of the beautiful mess that was conscious life celebrating its own existence. Outside the station, the stars shone brighter than they had in eons, no longer dimmed by the shadow of the void swarm. In the distance, former bioships flew peaceful missions, their occupants finally free to choose their own destinies after millions of years of forced unity. Humanity had given the galaxy its greatest gift, not technology or weapons, but the simple right to be different, to be individual, to be beautifully, chaotically, impossibly human. The end.